Most new gardeners fail before they ever get started, and it has nothing to do with skill. It has everything to do with the crops they choose. They plant what looks good at the nursery, what their neighbor grows, what they see in every recipe. And then summer arrives, the pests arrive, the disease arrives, and the harvest never does. Confidence gone, season wasted. But the problem was never the gardener. It was the crop selection. 5 crops exist that are specifically built for this stage of the journey. Productive, forgiving, skill building. And the first one is probably already waiting at the local nursery right now. 5 crops, each one chosen for a reason. Master these and the garden changes completely, starting with number 1. Number 1. Peppers. Peppers are one of the most underrated starter crops a new gardener can grow. Not because they are flashy, not because they are trendy, because they are forgiving, productive, and they quietly build almost every skill that matters in a vegetable garden. Most beginners walk right past them at the nursery. They want the big, dramatic harvest, the crop everyone talks about. But experienced growers know something beginners don't. Peppers are the crop that builds the foundation everything else depends on. They stay compact. Most plants top out around 3 feet, which means supporting them takes minutes. They shrug off most insect pests because there is very little about a pepper, sweet or hot, that attracts the kind of pressure other crops deal with all season long. And when fungal disease shows up, peppers recover. Cut them back, feed them well, and they push back stronger in the second half of the season when temperatures begin to ease. The variety range alone makes peppers worth exploring for years. Mild and sweet, fiery and bold, large enough to stuff for a full dinner, small enough to go straight from the plant to the plate. Whatever a household actually eats, there is a pepper that fits. The harvest rule is simple but critical, and most beginners get this wrong. The more a gardener picks, the more the plant produces. Leave fruit sitting on the vine too long and the plant stalls. It puts all its energy into ripening what is already there. Keep harvesting aggressively, and it keeps pushing out new flowers, new fruit, all the way through the end of the season. And here is what makes peppers the perfect starting point. Every skill they build transfers directly to harder crops later. Feeding schedules, irrigation depth, harvest timing, basic plant support. These are the same fundamentals that more demanding crops require. Peppers just teach them with far more room for error. One season with peppers, and a gardener stops guessing. They start knowing. But peppers are only the beginning. Because number 2 is a crop most new gardeners never think to plant, and it might deliver the most satisfying harvest of the entire season. Number 2. Potatoes. Most new gardeners never put potatoes on their list. They think of potatoes as a grocery store crop, something that comes in a bag, not something grown in a backyard. That assumption costs them one of the most rewarding harvests they could ever pull from the ground. Potatoes practically grow themselves. Drop them in, water them consistently, feed them every 2 weeks, and the plant does the rest underground. Completely out of sight, completely unbothered. No staking, no pruning, no daily monitoring. For a new gardener still building confidence, that kind of low-maintenance production is exactly what the first season needs. The one place beginners run into trouble is the harvest. Digging through a garden bed looking for potatoes is slow, frustrating, and easy to get wrong. Half the crop ends up damaged by a shovel before it ever reaches the kitchen. But there is a smarter way to do this. Growing potatoes in large fabric grow bags transforms the entire process. Plant them in the bag, grow them in the bag, and when harvest time arrives, tip the bag onto a tarp and collect everything at once. Clean, fast, no guesswork. Potatoes also offer something most summer crops cannot: a second chance. Plant a spring crop and harvest before the heat of summer peaks. Then plant again in midsummer and pull a fall harvest before the first frost arrives. 2 harvests, same space, same bags. The season essentially doubles without any additional effort. And then there is the storage. Properly cured potatoes hold for 3 to 4 months, sometimes longer. That is not just a harvest. That is a food supply. A gardener who grows potatoes is not just feeding their household today. They are building a reserve that carries well into winter. One crop underground, producing twice a season, storing for months. That is what potatoes bring to the table. Before moving to number 3, drop a comment below right now. Are you a brand new gardener this season, or are you coming back after a rough one? Because that answer might change which of these crops to start with first. Peppers build the skill set. Potatoes prove that the most rewarding harvests are sometimes the ones nobody sees coming, including the one buried in the next crop on this list, which has been feeding families for generations without asking for much in return. Number 3. Blackberries. Perennial crops change the way a gardener thinks about their space. Plant once, harvest for years. Most annuals demand a full restart every single season. New seeds, new transplants, new timeline. A perennial rewards the gardener who was patient enough to plant it the season before. Blackberries are one of the best perennials a new gardener can start with. But here is what most beginners do not know. The variety they choose determines everything. Most blackberry varieties are invasive, thorny, and demand a working knowledge of pruning cycles that take years to understand. Plant the wrong variety, and the garden turns into a tangled, unmanageable thicket within 2 seasons. The right variety removes all of that friction. A thornless, erect, primocane fruiting blackberry changes the experience completely. No thorns means harvesting is fast and painless. Erect growth means no sprawling vines taking over the yard, and no elaborate trellising system to build and maintain. And primocane fruiting means the plant produces fruit on new growth. So at the end of every season, it gets cut back close to the ground, and the following year's new growth brings the next harvest. No need to identify and preserve specific canes. No complex pruning knowledge required. Cut it back, walk away, come back to fruit. The production from a well-established blackberry plant is difficult to overstate. A single plant in its stride can deliver more fruit than a household can eat fresh, which means jam, preserved fruit, frozen stock for months after harvest season ends. The abundance compounds every year as the plant matures and strengthens. This is also where the mindset shift happens for new gardeners. Annuals teach how to grow. Perennials teach how to think long-term. A blackberry planted this season is still producing fruit 5-10 years from now. That is not just gardening. That is building something that lasts. Blackberries prove that the best harvests come back on their own. But the next crop on this list takes that idea even further. It asks for almost nothing, survives almost everything, and stores long after the rest of the garden has gone quiet. Number 4. Garlic. There is no crop in the garden that asks for less and delivers more consistently than garlic. Plant it in the fall, mulch it, water it occasionally through the winter, and then walk away. Months later, when the rest of the garden is just waking up, garlic bulbs are already underground, swelling toward harvest. Most beginners assume garlic is complicated. It is not. The entire growing process comes down to 2 decisions made at planting time: choosing the right variety for the climate and getting it in the ground at the right moment. Everything after that is mostly patience. Hardneck varieties perform best in climates with cold winters. They need the chill to form large, well-developed bulbs. Softneck varieties handle milder winters and tend to store longer once harvested. Gardeners in the middle, zones where winters are cold but not extreme, can grow either. And for gardeners in warmer climates who worry about meeting the chill requirement, the solution is simple. A few weeks in the refrigerator before planting gives the cloves exactly the cold exposure they need to bulb properly. Once it is in the ground, garlic is essentially self-sufficient. It repels insects naturally. Mammals avoid it. Disease is rarely a serious issue. In a decade of growing garlic, most experienced gardeners will struggle to name a single season where pests caused real damage. That level of reliability is rare in any garden crop. And for a new gardener still learning how to manage problems, a crop that simply does not have many problems is genuinely valuable. The harvest window is easy to read. When the lower leaves begin to yellow and die back, the bulbs are close to ready. Pull them, rinse them lightly, and let them cure in a dry, well-ventilated space for 2 to 3 weeks. After that, properly cured garlic stores for 4 to 6 months without refrigeration. A strong harvest in early summer is still feeding the household in winter, and there is one more reward that most new gardeners do not anticipate. At the end of the storage season, the best bulbs get saved, separated into cloves, and planted again in the fall. The harvest multiplies itself year after year, without spending another dollar on seed stock. Garlic does not just feed a household. Over time, it funds its own future. If garlic teaches patience and long-term thinking, the final crop on this list solves the problem that defeats more gardeners than almost anything else in the summer garden. And it does it in a way most people never see coming. Number 5. Squash. Squash should be one of the most beginner-friendly crops in the garden. It grows fast, it produces heavily, it is versatile in the kitchen. But for most new gardeners, squash turns into one of the most demoralizing experiences of the entire season. The vine borer is the reason. A single pest, a larvae that bores into the base of the squash vine, cuts off water and nutrient flow, and collapses the entire plant within days. Most gardeners do not even realize what happened until the plant is already dying. They replant. The borer finds the new plant. The cycle repeats until the season runs out. By midsummer, the enthusiasm for growing squash is gone. The solution is not a pesticide, it is a variety. The tromboncino squash, also called zucchino rampante, carries a strong natural resistance to vine borers that standard zucchini simply does not have. It vines aggressively up a trellis, takes up vertical space instead of spreading across the ground, and produces a crop that most gardeners are not prepared for in terms of sheer volume. Here is where it gets interesting. Tromboncino is not just a summer squash or a winter squash. It is both. Harvest it young and green, and it cooks exactly like a zucchini. Tender, mild, versatile. Let it mature fully on the vine, and the skin hardens into a shell. The flesh sweetens, and it stores at room temperature for 6 months to a year without any special treatment. No canning, no freezing, no preservation process. Just leave it on a shelf and it keeps. A squash harvested in late summer sitting in the kitchen in February. Still good, still feeding the household. That is not a common outcome in a beginner's garden. But with this variety, it becomes a realistic one. For gardeners in hot, humid climates, where pest pressure is especially intense, a second variety is worth knowing. The Seminole pumpkin is a native crop developed specifically for the conditions that destroy most squash. High heat, high humidity, heavy pest pressure. It handles all of it, stores well, and produces a reliable harvest in environments where other squash varieties simply cannot survive the season. Between the two, almost every gardener in almost every climate has a squash option that works. Without the heartbreak that has ended so many beginner squash growing attempts before the harvest ever arrived. The season does not have to end in failure. With the right variety, it ends with a shelf full of food. 5 crops. 5 different lessons. Peppers build the foundation. Potatoes prove that the biggest rewards are often the ones nobody sees coming. Blackberries teach that the best harvests keep returning on their own. Garlic demonstrates that patience and simplicity are 2 of the most powerful tools in any garden. And squash, the right squash, shows that the difference between failure and abundance is often just one better decision. That is what this list is really about. Not just growing food. Building the kind of garden that produces reliably, stores well, and keeps a household fed long after the season ends. That is self-reliance. Not in theory, in practice, on the shelf, in the kitchen, through winter. A gardener who masters these 5 crops does not just have a better garden next season. They have a completely different relationship with food, with their land, and with what they are capable of producing. And that is only the beginning. Because once these 5 are dialed in, there is a whole new category of crops waiting. Ones that multiply harvests, reduce grocery bills even further, and push the garden from productive to genuinely self-sufficient. That is exactly what the next video covers, and it is worth staying close for. Please like,